is achieveradio.com. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/achieveradio.
Welcome, everybody, live with Dr. Carolyn Dean here on achieveradio.com, and I'll just come out and say it. According to the people on our chat line already chiming in on the show and saying there is nothing better than Dr. Carolyn Dean and Dr. Fung together in one place. And I must say, I totally agree. I'm Ginny Gunther. I'm your host this evening, and we welcome you to our show. And we are so thrilled to have Dr. Jason Fung with us. And the combination of Dr. Carolyn Dean and her landmark work with the Magnesium Miracle, helping untold tens of thousands of people every day recover their health through magnesium and magnesium supplementation, mineral supplementation in her body of work, and then have Dr. Jason Fung with us. It's just so exciting, you guys. I'm smiling from ear to ear. You can probably hear it through the phone. And I want to say, first of all, just in case you have been someplace, maybe on the other side of the world, and you don't know who Dr. Fung is, I just want to tell you that Dr. Jason Fung grew up in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Dr. Dean did not grow up in Toronto, but she is a Torontonian at heart for sure, for real. And went to the University of Toronto at age 17, you guys, 17, to begin his studies in biochemistry. And by 23, he had already completed medical school. And he, once he finished his specialty of internal medicine, he even went deeper into it and went into nephrology, which is kidney disease. So he starts his career in treating people for kidney disease, and he's just, bam, 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 every single day, bam, bam, faced with this issue of type 2 diabetes, which is by far and away, as many people know, the leading cause of kidney disease. And so he decided, he was going to get into this thing and wrestle with it and figure out, how can I intercept people from having to be on, and sustained by kidney treatments and dialysis and all this. God bless his heart, just like Dr. Dean, wrestling down the big Goliath. And what does he discover? He discovers some of the most healthy, practical, functional ways to focus on obesity, type 2 diabetes, and help solve this health crisis for so many individuals and now for countries and for bodies of people. It's tremendous what he's done. And so he's here tonight with Dr. Dean. He is a leading expert in intermittent and low-carb fasting, and he's here tonight to talk to us, and we've got so few minutes of his precious time. We're going to get right to it. Right, Carolyn? Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. Hello, Dr. Fung. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Oh, look, you're just awesome. And, yes, we are fellow Canadians, and we did meet in August, and you were just fantastic. And just like Ginny said, we're going to dive right into the war zone. And I'm going to start off with a few questions, but we're going to get to our chat and our phone so that people can have at you. Okay, number one, does weight loss pretty much depend on being in the fat-burning zone?
Well, truthfully, yes, obviously, if you're going to lose weight and lose fat specifically, you have to be able to burn it. I think that's the real key to understanding is how to get into that sort of fat-burning zone, because this is the reason the body stores fat, is for you to use as fuel when you have nothing to eat. So one of the most effective and most efficient ways is to not eat anything, because it really just forces your body to use that fat. And that's basically it, because we get advice from the nutritionists and so on, it's pretty much everywhere. Well, to cut your dietary fat and to cut your calories and to eat 10 times a day sort of thing. And if it was effective, I'd be the first one to tell people to do it, but it's been so ineffective for so long, and that's not just my opinion. I mean, you can just look at the numbers and the obesity crisis and, that scary graph that the Center for Disease Control puts out every year showing how much obesity is in the United States over the years. And so it's really a matter of how do you get into that fat-burning zone. And really, calories does not play a significant role. Cutting the fat out is not a very effective strategy. And one of the more effective strategies is to implement this sort of intermittent fasting, which is not really hard to understand. Fasting is really any time that you're not eating. So when you're not eating, you're going to force your body to burn fat. And guess what? There's actually nothing wrong with it. It's natural. It's what it's there for. And all these sort of myths that grew up around fasting actually are not true.
Yeah. Yes, people are scared of not eating, that's for sure. Okay, next one. When people say the brain depends on glucose almost entirely, how accurate is that statement?
This is true for the most part. So the brain can only use one of two fuels. So most of the rest of the body, you can use either glucose, which is sugar, or fat, which is triglycerides or fatty acids. So when you take body fat, your muscles, your liver, your kidney, they can actually use it directly, but the brain cannot. So it depends, and the reason is that there's something called the blood-brain barrier, so that the fatty acids can't get through that barrier, so the brain actually has no access to fat. However, what happens during fasting is that your body, your liver, takes the fats and turns them into ketones and sends them right through the blood-brain barrier, and then your brain can use them. So, in fact, what happens is that your body can be powered up to 75% with ketones, and there's just a little bit of glucose that you need, but the fat is actually composed of not just the fatty acids, but something called the glycerol backbone, which can be turned into sugar. So while the brain might use up to 130 grams of sugar per day, it doesn't mean you have to eat 130 grams of carbohydrates per day. You don't have to eat any, and your body will be able to supply itself. And that's the thing. People have gone 2, 3, 4 days without eating. We see this in the hospital all the time. So, in fact, we tell people to do this. So for colonoscopy, for example, we'll tell people to not eat for 2 days because that clears out all the stool so they can get a nice look. So we tell 80-year-olds to do this, and, for 48 hours they won't eat, and guess what? Nothing bad happens to them. And yet we're afraid for a 30-year-old to go more than 3 hours without eating when we know that 80-year-old can go for 48 hours without any trouble.
All right. Perfect, yeah. Okay. What are the current negative studies on the keto diet missing?
Most of them are not very well done, and a lot of the diets that have come out so far, the diet trials that have come out so far, shows that low-carbohydrate and ketogenic diets are slightly superior to sort of standard diets. So, in fact, there's been over 20 studies sort of head-to-head low-fat versus low-carb. Ketogenic is sort of the extreme version of that, and all of them actually come out slightly better for the ketogenic diet. And again, people say, oh, well, it's bad for you. There's this one recent study that tried to suggest it could shorten your life. It's like, the study itself was very poorly done. They didn't actually follow a lot of ketogenic patients. And the other thing is that the ketogenic diet has been used since the 1920s for the treatment of epilepsy. So this is a very interesting story, actually, because back before all the anti-epileptic drugs, this was sort of a standard treatment. So if you didn't eat, so you'd go into ketosis, which is what happens when your body is just burning fat. Or if you use a ketogenic diet, which is super, super low carbohydrate and very high in fat, so you're using mostly ketones, what they discovered, sort of by chance, was that the seizures, like terrible seizures, would just go away. once they discovered these anti-seizure drugs, people forgot about it. And then it was sort of rediscovered in the 1990s, not by physicians, interestingly enough, but by a Hollywood producer who actually had a son who just they couldn't get it under control. And he actually discovered it by himself. He said, oh, let's try it. And like magic, those seizures went away. So it's part of standard treatment. So it's very interesting that we have now, at Johns Hopkins, there's a ketogenic clinic for kids for treatment of epilepsy. And they will go their whole life being ketogenic because obviously it's a treatment for their seizures. So we think, and we know those kids do very well. They don't suffer any, mental delay or growth retardation or anything like that. They do very well. And so children can do a ketogenic diet for their whole life, but adults can't even do it for 2 days. Is that right? Is that what people are telling us? It doesn't even make any sense. The whole thing is ridiculous. And yet it gets in the newspaper that, oh, hey, ketogenic diets are going to kill you and coconut oil is poison and all this sort of thing. And it just boggles the mind how these scientists can actually believe what's coming out of their own mouths. I mean, like coconut oil, for example. It's just a part of a ketogenic diet. It's like there's this big kerfuffle about some Harvard professor who said coconut oil is like poison. I'm like, that there are people in the South Pacific Islands who have traditionally eaten about a diet consisting of 70% coconut, okay? Literally all they're eating is coconut and fish. And they were extremely healthy. They looked great. There's no diabetes. There's no obesity. So they're eating what you think is poison, a 70% poison diet, and doing extremely well. So it's like, what does that tell you? Are they wrong or are you wrong? I mean, the whole thing is it makes no sense at all.
Right. Very good, very good. Okay, is hypoglycemia partly a person who hasn't been able to turn on their fat-burning function?
If you're not taking medications for type 2 diabetes or diabetes, so there are certain medications that will lower your blood glucose. If you're not taking those, then no amount of fasting should give you the symptoms of hypoglycemia. There are diseases of hypoglycemia, so you can get something called reactive hypoglycemia, but that's not related to anything. It's mostly related to eating, actually. It's when your sugars go low. But you have people who have fasted, so the world record fast was 382 days. So more than a year without eating. And his glucose went lowish, but stayed in the normal range. And again, it's because your body can produce this glucose from the fat cells, which is the glycerol in the triglyceride can produce glucose. You can also produce it from excess protein that you take. So you can produce your own glucose. So this fear of, you're going to go hypoglycemic. It's like, people have gone a year without going hypoglycemic. That 80-year-olds go 2 days without going hypoglycemic. So this again is one of those myths that you're going to go hypoglycemic. It's actually not true. Now, if you are taking medications, of course, then it's a possibility. So if you're taking insulin, for example, and you're fasting, that's sort of a double whammy in terms of lowering your blood glucose. So then that is where you have to be careful.
Right. Okay, excellent. Ginny had a couple of questions, and again, we'll try to make them short so we can get to our callers and our chat. But go ahead, Ginny.
No, Carolyn, you put me on the spot, and I didn't have that window open. Do you have them there?
Yes, absolutely. Jason, what are the biggest misconceptions about intermittent fasting?
So there's several. One is that you'll go into starvation mode, and this you hear all the time. You can't, starve yourself because then you'll go into starvation mode. So what that means is that starvation mode is this idea that your body will start to shut itself down when you don't eat. So if your body normally burns like 2,000 calories a day, for example, then as you go into this starvation mode, you're going to burn, say, 1,000 calories a day, which makes it harder and harder to lose weight because you're not burning off as many of those calories that you're taking in. And this is the reason people say, oh, you should eat every 3 hours. But it turns out it's completely false. If you look at studies and if you look at the physiology of fasting, what happens is that when you don't eat, certain hormones go down. So insulin goes down, which is what opens up the floodgates for the body fat, for the body to start burning the fat. But there are other hormones that go up when you don't eat, and those include sympathetic nervous system gears up, and that's your fight or flight response. So your body actually activates itself. So it's not shutting down. It's actually turning up the engines. And adrenaline, noradrenaline go up, growth hormone goes up, and those are some of the hormones that are called the counter-regulatory hormones because they run opposite of insulin. Insulin goes down, these go up. So in fact, if you take, and there are studies that have done that, you take a person who hasn't eaten for 4 days, and you measure their metabolic rate at the beginning and at the end of 4 days of not eating, what you find is that their metabolic rate is actually 10% higher than when you started. That is, if you're burning 2,000 calories at day 0, after not eating for 4 days, you're burning 2,200 calories a day. And the reason is that the body actually is not trying to shut itself down because of a lack of food. What it is doing is it's simply switching its fuel source from food to stored food, which is body fat. And it's like a hybrid car. You go between gas and electric without any problems. And the body is the same thing. What we're doing is we're forcing the switch, not so that we can, run the car any slower, but because we're just switching fuel sources, and the body's like, oh, yeah, I'm just burning body fat now, and there's tons of this stuff, so I'm going to keep going. So that's one of the big myths, because it's exactly the opposite. If you actually do studies where you compare the standard strategy of cutting, say, 500 calories a day and eating 6 times a day and cutting out the fat, what you do find is that your basal metabolic rate goes down, which is why people who do that, cut 500 calories a day, it sounds like it'll work, but it doesn't. It doesn't work for anybody. It's because your body actually starts to shut down, as opposed to the fasting, which actually revs up the body instead. And that's probably the biggest one. There's other ones.
All right.
So the other one is about burning muscle.
That's good. Well, what I want to say right now is people should really look at your books, The Complete Guide to Fasting, The Obesity Code, The Diabetes Code. It was amazing how you wove the story and all the studies and the history of fasting into your books. I just enjoyed them wholeheartely, and it looks like you're coming out with a cookbook too. You've been doing a book a year, so people really, it's very important that you kind of intellectually grasp what Dr. Fung is saying here so that you will feel safe in going forward with your diet. And I think one last one, what is this about fat fasting? Are you in favor of that? Is that part of a kind of a therapeutic protocol that you would recommend?
Yeah, so fat fasting is really just a variation of fasting where you take mostly fat. And so something like bulletproof coffee is a good example of that, very popular on the West Coast, for example, where you take coffee with MCT oil and butter and you blend it into coffee. So it's mostly fat that you're drinking and eating. And what people say is that it keeps them full and then they don't have to eat. But they are taking a lot of calories, so you might wonder, well, why are they losing weight? Because some people do very well. You hear these stories of people, they swear by this, and that's why people do it. And the reason is that even though there's a lot of calories, the insulin effect of pure fat is very low. So therefore, if insulin is low, you're still able to stay in that fat-burning zone. Because for your body, whether it burns fat in your diet or fat from your body, it really makes no difference. So therefore, your body stays in the fat-burning state rather than switching to glucose, and then therefore people don't feel that hungry, and it's really the same. Obviously, if you do have to burn off that energy you took in from the fat, But as a sort of intermediate step, it makes perfect physiologic sense, and actually some people have done very well. If you don't do well, of course, then you should try perhaps sort of classic fasting. But it is one of the variations, and there's lots of variations of fasting, and I do go over those in the Complete Guide to Fasting. And yeah, I think you're, just to get back to the books, I think they are different because I deal a lot with sort of the science behind weight loss, behind fasting, so that people understand that, hey, there's nothing to fear here. There's nothing to be worried about because there just are a lot of myths, and people will just say stuff on the internet. And if you arm yourself with that knowledge that, hey, this is the way the body works, right? You store fat so you can use it. You don't store it for looks. It's there for you to use. So if it's now making you sick or you don't like it for whatever reason, let your body use it because it's okay. That's why you put it there. And there just aren't a lot of books like that out there, which is why I really wrote them in the first place. So the Obesity Code, for example, was talking about really what causes weight gain. Because, I've read a lot of books about diet, and almost none deal with the topic of why we gain weight. And that's because we all think it's about calories. But it's not. It has nothing to do with calories. So if you're counting calories, you're already on the wrong track. What you need to do is sort of fix the hormones of the body so that you get into that sort of fat-burning zone, and you fix the hormonal problems. And same with fasting. People are, well, I can't fast. It's like, well, that's because you don't know that there actually is a huge amount of science. You need to know what the myths are, what problems can come up, what, for example, what to expect. So there are problems that do come up, obviously. There's a period of time, like the first couple of weeks are going to be more difficult, and some people get headaches, and some people get diarrhea. So knowing that ahead of time lets you prepare yourself mentally to do these sort of things. And again, there just was no book that was dealing with that. I remember I talking to somebody, and he said, oh, this is really interesting, this thing about fasting. Where can I go to read some more about it? What book is good? I said, I don't think there's any book out there.
Yeah,
said, well,
that's right.
You got it right. I said, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, good for you. Good for you. And, of course, I should interject here because I know my listeners are thinking, well, they've gotten into keto and intermittent fasting, and they do find, and I've mentioned this to you, that with the good minerals and some like bentonite or psyllium, they can overcome the detox effects of fasting, and they can get the nutrients that their body seems to be missing because they're not eating food. And I should say too that when you think about the carbs that we eat, a lot of people say, well, you should eat carbs because they have the vitamins and minerals, but those vitamins and minerals are pretty much depleted in our current food sources. So I just wanted to interject that little sidebar there before we turn over to Ginny and a whole host of questions.
Yeah, and the one thing we do see, if I could just say one other thing, is we've put thousands of people through fasting protocols, and the one mineral really that is more important than anything else is the magnesium. That's the one that we have the most trouble with people getting down on. They get cramps, they get constipated, and then we're always trying to tell people, you got to get, and people try and take salt, and I was like, okay, salt is okay, but you need to make sure you get some magnesium, and that's sometimes the hardest thing to get people in, right? And you know all about that, so it's the fat is the one that turns up more than anything else.
Right. And when I was speaking with Dr. Fung in August, he said that he was one of the first nephrologist to put his dialysis patients on IV magnesium because he saw that was being so depleted. So that may start to turn the tide because a lot of kidney specialists think that magnesium is just evil, and it's very sad because people do need some magnesium. So, yeah, I appreciate you leading the charge on that.
Yeah, that one, in dialysis, of course, we have access to intravenous, so we actually are able to give them directly into their blood, sort of big doses, and we see what a big difference it makes to people. Cramps. I mean, we deal with cramps all the time, and you give them a few doses, and it goes away, and then, after a few months, we'll often have to do it again because they're getting the cramps back, and they'll say, oh, can I have that magnesium? I'm like, I'm getting the cramps again. I'm like, sure.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, Ginny, finally, we're getting to you.
Oh, well, I'm willing to wait, but we've got so many questions here, Dr. Fung, and I do just want to start off with a few basic keto questions, and then a lot of our questions are related to intermittent fasting, and some people are related to the specifics of their experience and how they may be able to tweak it a little bit with your advice. So we'll kind of go in that order. And one of the most common questions that we get is if you are doing keto and the keto diet, well, describe how you have the keto diet in terms of macros. What percent of what is what?
So usually it's defined by the number of grams of carbohydrates per day. So a standard sort of American diet with 50% carbs. So remember, the dietary guidelines for years said 50 to 60% carbohydrates was the sort of ideal. So you're talking somewhere on the order of 200 to 300 grams of carbohydrate per day. 50 grams per day is sort of the standard definition of low carb, and ketogenic diets are typically less than about 20 grams of carbohydrates per day. So it's really very little. So percentage of macronutrients, the difference between sort of just a low carbohydrate diet and a ketogenic diet is that the ketogenic diet tries to avoid excessive protein as well. So it's very low carb, sort of moderate protein, not high protein, and then high fat, because obviously there's three macronutrients: carbohydrates, proteins, and fat. And if you're going to take very little carbs and just the normal amount of protein, you got to make up for it with a lot of dietary fat. So that's generally how the macros work out, is sort of less than 20 grams of carbohydrates. You're talking very low percentage of carbohydrate. Protein, you're talking kind of standard amount, and the daily allowance for that is 0.8 grams per kilo of lean weight. So not a lot. It's about 50, 60 grams of protein per day, which is actually lower than most Americans take. So most Americans are closer to 1.2 to 1.5 grams per kilo per day. So it's actually a little bit lower than standard, but that's the recommended daily amount. And then the rest of that is fat. So you wind up with a lot of sort of high-fat foods, like fatty pieces of meat, for example, bacon, and things like avocados and nuts and olive oil, and things like leafy greens and a lot of vegetables, non-starchy vegetables, are typically fairly low in carbohydrates as well. So those are all very good.
Okay, so how does this work biologically? You're wanting to burn fat, but then you're eating fat. So if I ate, like my macros are 110 grams of fat a day, but then if I'm eating that, how is my body going to burn the fat that I already have? I don't understand that.
Yeah, that's a good question, because most people don't. And it gets back to the question of how people gain weight. So it's not the calories that's important. So it's the insulin. Insulin is the hormone that basically tells your body to store body fat. If insulin is very high, then you gain weight. So when we prescribe insulin to patients, they actually gain weight, all of them, almost all of them. If you have situations where insulin is very, very low, this is the situation in type 1 diabetes, where there's no insulin, people lose weight, and no matter what you feed them, they'll keep losing weight until they get emaciated and die. And that's what used to happen in the 1920s before the discovery of insulin. So insulin is really the main hormone that tells your body to store fat. So essentially, obesity is a problem of excessive insulin. So what you have to understand is that carbohydrates, and to a lesser degree protein, both stimulate insulin, but dietary fat does not. So when you eat fat, it actually produces very little insulin effect. So what happens is that if you're eating mostly fat, you're not producing much insulin. That fat actually goes it gets absorbed directly into the lymphatic system, into the blood, and then goes to your fat cells. And you might think, okay, that's really bad. But what happens is that as your fat cells get bigger, they produce leptin. Leptin turns off your appetite, and then you use up that energy. So now you're allowing leptin to sort of normalize your appetite, and that's why people on ketogenic diets can lose weight. Not because they're restricting calories, not because they're restricting fat, but because they're eating foods that have very little insulin effect, which tells the body not to store any fat, which allows the fat cells to produce the leptin to tell the body not to eat anymore. And that's one of the reasons why people on ketogenic diets, for example, find that they don't get hungry. So they're often eating once a day just because they just don't feel hungry, and that's that leptin that's sort of telling your brain to stop eating. Now, if you force feed yourself, and this is one of the things that some people get wrong, is if you think you still need to eat 6 times a day and you're not hungry and you're just putting in fat for no reason, now you're not listening to your body. Your body was saying, I don't need any more food. I'm doing fine with the fat cells, your body fat. So that's one of the situations where people sort of get it wrong and they try and force feed themselves more fat thinking they need it. It's like if your body needs it, it will take it from the body fat stores. So that's sort of physiologically how the ketogenic diet works. I know it's a little complicated, especially if you're used to thinking about calories and so on, but it's really about fixing the hormonal problem, because when you eat 100 calories of food, your body actually has a choice. It can either store it as fat or it can burn it for energy. Okay, so it's not the 100 calories that's the problem. It's really what the body does with that 100 calories. And that's the real issue. Insulin is the driver of telling you where to go. So if you eat a lot of white bread and sugar and so on, then your body's insulin goes up. You store all that as fat. And because you're storing all those calories, your body's like, well, I have nothing to use. So then you eat toast and jam in the morning. By 10 o'clock, you're hungry again. Because you've turned all those calories into fat. And there's nothing left, so you have to go out and get more.
Okay, excellent. That's a beautiful explanation. Thank you so much. Now, we're going to go into fasting questions, but before we do, I would like you to please describe to our listeners, what is autophagy? What is that aspect of fasting? What does that mean?
So autophagy is this relatively recently discovered pathway of cellular recycling. So it's very important, and it was won the discoverer sort of the Nobel Prize in 2016. And what it is that when you fast, your body actually breaks down some of these subcellular parts. And that sounds bad, you're breaking down protein, but it's actually not a bad thing, because what happens is that as you break down these proteins, your body increases growth hormone during fasting. And then when you eat again, you will rebuild those proteins that you need. So you'll break down what you don't need and then replace whatever you need. So in essence, what you're doing is that you're renewing your proteins or rejuvenating yourself. So people have looked at this and seen a lot of benefits in terms of anti-aging. They also see benefits in terms of disease prevention. So certain diseases where there's sort of excessive accumulation of protein, things like Alzheimer's and maybe cancer and all these other things, people are studying them because breaking down these old proteins is a very powerful effect. Because if you think about it, would you rather have those old junky proteins still sticking around your body, or would you rather get rid of them and replace them with new ones? So in essence, it's like getting rid of your old clunker of a car and then getting a new one. Who wouldn't want that? Well, you're doing the same thing in the cells. You're keeping them young, you're keeping them healthy because you're replacing them. And it's really this cycle of feeding and fasting that does that. The fasting helps break down unnecessary proteins, and then the feeding helps rebuild what it is that you do need. And that is why you don't see this loss of muscle when you do the fasting as opposed to the calorie restriction, because your body is constantly going through these sort of renewal cycles. So For example, in our IDM program, so we have this thing called the Intensive Dietary Management Program, which is an online dietary program sort of available to anybody at idmprogram.com. What it is we've had people lose like 100, 150 pounds, but we've had nobody go for skin removal surgery because we allow the body to burn off that protein because the body doesn't want to keep around protein it doesn't need. So it's just anecdotal evidence, but we hear stories all the time of people who are saying, yeah, my skin started tightening up. It's like, wow, who wouldn't want that? Because that skin, that connective tissue, that's not fat that's being lost. That's protein that's being lost. And in obesity, what you see is that people have sort of 20 to 50% more protein as compared to a lean person. And that's all protein that needs to be sort of burnt off.
Oh, that's awesome. So in the, if you were just starting out and you say, okay, I want to hit that autophagy zone. I want to get to where, I'm getting some benefit from my fasting. What do you think the threshold is for that for the body? Or maybe or that was featured in the study. Can you comment on that?
I have a guess, but the studies are sort of ongoing because it's really a very newly discovered process. And mostly they do these studies in rats and so on. But my guess is that where you start to see the protein being burned is somewhere around 20 to 30 hours of fasting. So one of the strategies and during that fasting, it would need to be fairly strict sort of water only, because if you take too much of these variations of fasting, you can turn off the autophagy. So something like 24-hour fasting is sort of like a dinner-to-dinner sort of strategy. Some people also call it a one-meal-a-day strategy. And that's about 24 hours, and you're probably starting to see some of the benefits of autophagy when you get into that state. And for people for weight loss and type 2 diabetes, for example, we'll often recommend sort of this one-meal-a-day strategy, and if remember, no snacks and so on. A couple of times a week, like 2 to 3 times per week, for example.
Excellent. Okay, here's some other questions from our chat line and our listeners. And by the way, you have a lot of fans here this evening who have written in, tremendous complimentary things about your work and about reading your books and what you've done for them. I want to read this one real quick because it's very common of what other people are saying. Happy to hear from you, Dr. Fung. In my humble opinion, a ketogenic diet and lifestyle is way more than for just losing weight. Becoming fat adapted is also great for inflammation, seizures, as you mentioned, and migraines, which I can attest to, yay. I am comfortably intermittent fasting for 16 to 18 hours so far the last 4 months, plus, of course, I take Dr. Dean's Complement Formula. So thank you for all your contribution to all the many people who've checked in with us this evening. It's been fantastic. All right, let's get to some of these questions. Where did I do with them? Sorry about that. Hold on just a second. Okay, a lot of them on variations with fasting. So here's one. Dr. Young, when I do intermittent fasting in the morning, I have coffee when I first get up and then bone broth an hour later. If I swallow a few supplements with either of these, am I breaking the fast?
Yeah, so this is, again, just variations of fasting. So to be completely technical, water only is the only true fast. It depends on what your reasons for doing it is. So if you're doing it for sort of metabolic health, either type 2 diabetes or obesity, then those little bits of sort of cheating make very little difference. That is, yes, there's a bit of fat, there's a bit of protein, there's a bit of calories in the coffee and the milk, but it makes so little difference that it doesn't, practically speaking, matter. You can still do extremely well. And in fact, most of the time I do fasting, I do with coffee because I mostly enjoy having a coffee or two a day. So yeah, you can still do very well. If you're doing it for other reasons, then you may have to be more strict. So the one thing would be autophagy. If people are looking for specific results, that's the only one. It's all theoretical in terms of the autophagy. But people do it for cancer, for example. It makes chemotherapy more tolerable and so on. So there's a few reasons that people have to be more strict, but I'd say for the majority of people, taking these little cheats to make it easier is, I recommend them because it makes it simpler and you're not losing a lot on the other side by taking that little bit. Michael Mosley, for example, wrote the 5-2 diet, which is also where on 2 days of the week you eat 500 calories, for example. So that's also a variation of fasting, but that allows a lot more, like 500 calories on that fasting day, and they still have people who get good results. So, a little bit of cream or a little bit of coffee or a little bone broth, I'm not so worried about that.
Very good. Here's something that's popped up twice, and it's just a combination of intermittent fasting and succeeding with that, but then getting gout. And 2 people have written in that the intermittent fasting provoked them to a state of gout. Do you know anything about that? Is that a common occurrence, and can you talk about that?
Yeah, the studies show that there shouldn't be a big increase in gout, but you can increase your uric acid during fasting. So it's very interesting because fasting brings most stuff down. Because if you're not eating anything, then most stuff goes down. About the only thing that goes up is the uric acid, and that's where some people do run into trouble with that. So that's where you may have to be careful, and if you are having problems, then intermittent fasting may not be the answer for you, or you may have to be a bit more careful. That is, maybe you have to do a variation, which isn't completely against it, or you may need medication. But yes, that is the one sort of thing in the body that does go up with fasting, which is very unusual, and it probably has to do with the renal reabsorption. So it's hard to imagine why would your uric acid go up if you're eating 0, and it's because your body can actually reabsorb the uric acid from the kidneys, and it does so when you're dehydrated. So making sure you take plenty of salt, for example, is a strategy to sort of minimize the uric acid rise, because then your body has plenty of salt. It's going to be able to excrete that uric acid normally, as opposed to trying to reabsorb it. So yeah, that's the story with the uric acid.
Okay. Here's the question. I'm a 59-year-old female, and earlier this year I read your book, The Obesity Code, and went on full intermittent fasting, 20 hours and eating in a 4-hour window. After 6 months, my testosterone and estrogen levels got very high and caused my hair to start shedding. I like the fasting lifestyle, but I want to know how I can do it safely and protect my hormone levels. I need to lose about another 15 pounds and would like to decrease my body fat, which the fasting did for me. I have started Dr. Dean's Mineral Protocol. I would appreciate any information Dr. Fung could provide.
Yeah, so hair loss, you can actually see that with any change in diet. So ketogenic diets can have the same problem. You get this temporary hair loss, which is mostly comes back. So fasting can do the same thing. And so you see this with any sort of change in diet or stress. You can get this temporary hair loss. It usually comes back, and if it doesn't, then checking with somebody is important. Maybe taking some mineral supplements and biotin and some of these other things, making sure you're getting enough supplements during that to make sure you're not malnourished. But it is common to get that, both with ketogenic diets and fasting, but it shouldn't persist, and that's something that's a little bit unusual. It should be sort of a temporary 3, 4, or 5 month sort of thing and then come back. Just like with pregnancy, for example, you see the same thing where people will have, lots of hair loss during that, and it's clearly a hormonal issue. But the hormones that are affected mostly by fasting shouldn't be causing a lot, like a permanent sort of hair loss.
Okay, very good. Dr. Fung, have you written any books on or any segments on autophagy? If somebody wanted to study that a little further, where would they look and how would they find the information about the Nobel Prize winner?
You'd have to look online. There's a few books that have described it, but there's not a lot. I mean, I've written a few blog posts about it, but there's not enough to really write a book about it because most of the studies are on yeast. That's what won him his Nobel Prize. Yeast and rats mostly. We know that this process also happens in humans, but there's just not enough data to show where it fits in. Obviously, this was only 2016 that he won his Nobel Prize, and he won it for his work in yeast. So to get all the human data and to understand where it's going to fit in for human wellness and so on is still going to take a bit of time. So there's a few blog posts you can see. I don't know that there's a huge amount of literature available at the current time, though.
Okay, wonderful. Also, we have several of our listeners that are looking at your website, and they say he has 3 books. Which one is the best one to start with understanding the basic of the principles he's talking about now, today?
So the Obesity Code is really a book about what causes weight loss and weight gain. So that's a good place to start. It's not... there are a lot of practical tips, and it touches on intermittent fasting at the end as one of the strategies. It describes mostly that insulin is the main hormone for weight loss. So it's mostly a science book. The Complete Guide to Fasting is sort of the more practical version of that. If the science doesn't interest you too much and you really just want to get into the nitty-gritty of how to do it, what to do, variations, and what to eat when not fasting, that sort of thing, that's the Complete Guide to Fasting. So you could start with that one if you didn't want to get into the science. For me, I would recommend reading the Obesity Code so you understand the science and then implementing it, with the Complete Guide to Fasting. The Diabetes Code, my third book, is really more specific if you have prediabetes or diabetes. Again, it's a science book about what type 2 diabetes is, which leads to how you can sort of naturally reverse type 2 diabetes using these sort of dietary strategies.
And, okay, wonderful. Couple more, one more question on the restricted eating, and then we'll kind of do a couple case study questions. But if anybody, Dr. Fung, who's taking medication, taking a medication at any time in their intermittent, does that break a fast, or do supplements break the fast? Is that breaking a fast?
Not really. I mean, when you're talking about breaking a fast, you're mostly talking about taking food, which is mostly the macronutrients, so carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. So supplements like magnesium or those sort of things are not really considered breaking a fast. Neither is medications. You're talking about food, sort of specific.
Excellent. Okay. Question for the show, Dr. Dean and Dr. Fung. I've been a fan of your product for a year or so. I tell everyone that will listen about your magnesium. I'm 50 years old. I've been intermittent fasting since April of this year, and magnesium has definitely helped me. I drink it in my water bottle every day. I fast about 20 hours each day, and I eat in a 4-hour window. I love it. My weight loss has stalled, but I feel better when I'm fasting, and my blood sugar feels more stable. One question I have for you and Dr. Fung is, does the daily fasting reverse fatty liver over time? Or are longer fasts, so like say 72, 48-hour type of fast, required for improving the health of fatty liver? My dad died from diabetic complications, and my goal is not to have diabetes at all. I follow both of you, and I'm so grateful for all your work. It has improved my life tremendously. Thank you, Charlotte.
So you can do very well with just the intermittent fasting, but a lot of times we do find that people plateau after a while. And what we do recommend is sort of changing things up. The longer fasts, of course, you have to be a bit more careful with them because they're more powerful. But on the other hand, they actually do much better than the shorter fast, because what you do, of course, is you allow your body to use up some of the fat. And it turns out the first place it's going to pull the fat out of is the liver, because it's sort of right there. So the fatty liver actually reverses very quickly with fasting, particularly in that sort of 48, 30, 72-hour window. You'll probably get a good effect with it. So that's what we often recommend people give a try, is consider doing a multiple-day fast and see how you feel, especially if you're not hungry. If you skip that one meal, all of a sudden you've gone into that, that period of time. And what you have to think about when you're doing these longer fasts is you're allowing your body to sort of eat its meals from your body fat. And it's going to take that out of your liver first, because that's the whole goal of, that's the whole point of having body fat, is to use during fasting. So let your body fast, digest it, eat it, and take it out of the liver first, and then that'll reverse it. So we see a lot of diabetes reversal for people who are doing the fasting on a regular basis.
Excellent, excellent. A couple people are curious about either hypo or hyperthyroidism and fasting. The question kind of just seems to be similar. I've been diagnosed with Hashimoto's. I have a high T4 count. I don't feel any symptoms discovered during a routine medical exam. My T4 has been fluctuating around 8 to 12. I'm interested in fasting and using minerals to help my thyroid function. Do you have any specific advice for me?
It shouldn't affect the shorter fast, particularly. It shouldn't really affect the thyroid much at all. So if you think about fasting and not eating, thyroid function is not affected mostly. So it's mostly about insulin. It's mostly about the counter-regulatory hormones. None of that should affect either sex hormones like testosterone, estrogen, or thyroid. So it shouldn't matter one way or the other. With longer fasts, some people do find an improvement in inflammation, which can sometimes improve Hashimoto's, for example, which is an autoimmune disease. But for the most part, it shouldn't make a huge difference one way or the other.
Okay. And also, we have several international listeners who've typed in or written us prior to the show and specifically asking about, do you do consults? This one gal in particular, very sweet gal, she says that her mother has all kinds of diabetes, kidneys, joints, arms, knees, hips, and her doctor told her, you're 80 years old, do what you want to do. There's no cure for you. So she wants to see if she can talk to you by Skype or something like that. Is that possible? Or if you don't do that, how can she work with your team, or what's the availability there?
Yeah, so we have this program, the IDM program, so the Intensive Dietary Management Program. And it's basically dietary counseling, and that's online. So you can actually just go on our website, idmprogram.com, and book some sessions with some of our counselors. Now, the thing you have to be aware of is it's a dietary program only, because we can't give medical advice. Like, we can't say, you should do this with your medication, this with your medication. I don't have a license in wherever she is, so that's not sort of legal for anybody to do. Even a doctor, I can't give advice to a person in Hawaii and say you should do this, because that's personal medical advice and you can't do that. But you can give dietary advice, just like Weight Watchers online. You say, here, do this with your diet, but make sure you go to your own doctor to adjust your medication. So if she wants to get some help with the fasting, she can certainly reach out to us. Just look us up online at idmprogram.com and, hook up with one of the counselors, and they'll be happy to work with you. But again, it's only dietary advice. So if her doctor is willing to see her on a regular basis, monitor her, make sure she's doing okay, check her blood work, adjust her medications, then we can provide dietary advice to her, no problem.
Okay, excellent. And we'll do one more quick question, and then we're going to have to wrap it up, Dr. Fung. It's been such a pleasure, and we'll get Dr. Dean to come back on with her closing comments. This gal says, I'm perimenopausal and having a hard time losing weight. I've done keto with intermittent fasting, but I'm not losing any advice. I'm 47 years old, 5'5". My normal weight was 135, and I'm 150 now. I know it's not a huge amount, but it's very frustrating to me, and I'd like to lose it.
Yeah, and for sure in that perimenopausal age, it's more difficult. A lot of people say that. You have to realize that everybody reacts differently. So you can do a ketogenic diet, and one person will lose 20 pounds, the next person will gain 10 pounds, but it'll be the same diet. So everybody responds very differently, and it's the same with fasting. Some people do very well, and others people, it takes a long time. So the key is, if it's not really working, to try and change it up somehow. And it doesn't really matter. Like, you might want to try changing the meal timing, so cutting out the eating late at night and eat more early in the morning, for example. Do longer fasts is another way to do it, or be more strict in terms of ketogenic, or go more to a plant-based. Like, there's all different. Like, there's infinite variations, to your diet. Some people will do well and some people won't. Even on the low-fat diet, some people will do well and some people won't. So it's just a matter of sort of tweaking it, trying to see what happens to you specifically, because it doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. You should be doing the exact same thing as the person next to you who lost 50 pounds. So don't understand that it's not you specifically. It's the interaction of the type of diet and your own personal physiology, because we're all individuals. So yeah, it's mostly a matter of, okay, that's not working for you. What else can you do? And there's so many different things people have done. They've done, but for us, we mostly recommend sort of switching to trying some longer fasts and seeing how your body responds to that.
Excellent. Dr. Dean, would you like to join us again in your closing comments?
Well, let me just say what I would do with someone who's perimenopausal is ask questions about, are you in total body meltdown? What's your thyroid doing? What's your adrenals doing? Are your sex hormones trying to take you down? So that's when I really go into the minerals. There are 9 minerals that the thyroid needs, for example. And with that sort of protocol, people get the benefit of the nutrients and the building blocks, and then they're able to do the fasting. Fasting for some people can be like such a shocking stress that the body just holds on and it won't let anything go. So that's the way I would handle a perimenopausal total body meltdown.
Excellent, excellent. And thank you, Dr. Fung, so much. We know your website. We know your IDM program. Everybody, if you have questions for Dr. Fung after the show or you listen to the archive, how can they contact you with those questions? And would it be through the program, IDM program?
Yeah, that's probably the best place to go.
Okay, very good. Excellent. Carolyn, anything else?
Oh, it's just been great to have you on. I know you are supremely busy. You have tens and tens and tens of thousands of people that follow you on Twitter. I saw you were with Ben Greenfeld last weekend, and he's a real fan of magnesium and now of keto. So it's like you're covering the waterfront, and it's just wonderful to see.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having me here.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yes,
we'll stay
it was
touch.
fantastic. Thank you so much.
All right, you're welcome.
Okay, everybody, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with Hour 2 of Live with Dr. Carolyn Dean. This is AchieveRadio.com.
We'll be back with Hour 2 of Live with Dr. Carolyn Dean, along with host Ginny Gunther, after this brief station break. You can also get updates and resources online by visiting drcarolyndean.com.
Okay.
Psychic radio, holistic radio, spiritual radio. This is AchieveRadio.com. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/AchieveRadio.
Think of something you hadn't had in a while, like a crazy Italian cream cake, and have it show up, and you not do a thing. You already think of people, and they ring you on the phone now, don't they? Well, reinforce that. And what you'll find then, very quickly, is that there'll be a little cadence. Now, that's a fun way of describing frequency. We call it frequency. And if you frequently get your frequency on, that'll help you in the aligning of frequency. Remember in the old days in the radio, would be driving along, and you'd have to have the knob, and you'd turn it to get it right on station so it'd be clear? Well, you were adjusting your tuner to pick up on that frequency completely. It made no difference how loud the volume was. You get it right on the station, get it right up, and then you could crank it up, and you can have it just as loud as you can stand it. But the easier way to go at this is focus on the frequency of your frequency, and then you'll notice a rhythm or a cadence. And then the rhythm or the cadence will allow you to easily identify and connect with that frequency, or allow your tuner to more easily hit the nail on the head.
The oldest and most trusted station of its kind in the world. This is AchieveRadio.com.
Here we go now. Go to the Carolyn. Here we go now. Here we go now. The wellness scene with Dr. D. Here we go now. Here we go now. Go to the Carolyn. The wellness scene with Dr. D.
Welcome back, everybody. Hour 2 live with Dr. Carolyn Dean tonight. Carolyn, what a great first hour. So fun to have Dr. Fung on. And I learned something. Did you learn some stuff?
Oh, yes. It was great. I didn't know much about fat bombs and fat dieting. That was interesting. Yeah, he is a wonderful person who, and I think, as you said in the beginning, it's like he saw the lack of information about fasting, about what was causing obesity and what was creating all this kidney disease, and he decided to find out more about it. And instead of being kind of boxed in by just trying to find a drug solution, he went outside the box. And it's just wonderful what he's been able to do, because being a double subspecialty, well, he's an internist, so that meant 4 years extra medical education, and then probably 2 to 4 years in nephrology. I mean, the guy was in med school for like 12 years. So that gives a person a certain authority in their field. So people can't just toss him off. So
Right, very good. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just great that he took the time to hang out with us. I think it's fantastic. So, you know what I think we should do, Ginny, is I think you'll have to throw the mailbag questions that we got today to me, because if I don't answer them on the show here, I'll be spending all night doing emails. So can we do that, please?
Yeah, we can do that. Let's clear up a couple things too, Carolyn, just in general is, first of all, one of the questions on the chat line was, how do you get a proper intake of potassium if you're doing a keto diet? Because you can't really get it from bananas and that kind of thing. What's your response to that?
Well, that's the vegetable broth. The potassium broth is just the skins of potatoes and zucchinis and a few vegetables that boil down into potassium. So potassium broth. It's in one of the books. What do you think? Do you think it's in the Remite book? Probably.
It could, yeah, it's probably in the Remite book, because that's the multi-mineral book. And there is some potassium in Remite, but yes, you can get it from the potassium broth. And if you want to make it a little bit more rich, you can throw in some bones and turn it into a potassium bone broth. Very good. Here's a question. I don't have a weight problem, but I have sugar level that rises with carbs. I do green juice fast from 1 to 3 days. Can using juices from leafy greens a good form of fasting?
I don't know a lot about that. You heard Dr. Fung. He had the stats and the research right at his fingertips. I haven't looked at what's going on with green juice fasting. I would say make sure it's organic, because otherwise you're going to concentrate the pesticides and herbicides. You can't really depend on greens to have all the minerals anymore, so make sure you keep on your sea salted water, Remag and Remite. I think that's all I can say. When I put it in the keto book that I wrote, I talked about the psyllium and bentonite when you're fasting, and also coffee enemas. So when you're fasting, you're detoxing, and there are those things that you can do to help make it easier. And as for the high sugar, well, what Dr. Fung said is if you're not eating carbs, then you're not stimulating your insulin, and therefore you're going to stop yourself from the ups and downs of blood sugar and insulin. I really don't know how much carbs are in this concentrated green juice. I mean, that would be a question. Are you getting more than 20 grams of carbs that would then be working your insulin? So as you can see, I'm dancing around that question. Don't have all the answers.
Right. Yeah, I think, very good. And Dr. Fung's book on, fasting would be a good place to look as a resource, but I agree that if anything that's stimulating your pancreas, carbohydrate-wise, is not considered fasting.
Right. Yeah.
That's what you're trying to do, is shut the pancreas off so it will stop making insulin. If you are fasting and you get headaches, Carolyn, what is your remedy for that?
Coffee enema.
Okay, very good. Yep, very good. And also make sure your Remeg, you've got your Remeg too, right?
Oh, of course. Yes. Yeah, well, but we just assume people are taking their minerals, and they don't tend to get into any symptoms. I've been fasting. I'm in my second day of a fast right now, and it's quite incredible. I have no cravings. I love the feel of, an empty stomach, a little gurgling around, and I will, when I'm fasting, the fasting days, I will do a coffee enema, and I like my coffee enemas. So, it's just developing kind of a protocol around the whole thing. I take more RNA drops on my days of fasting, and I will do the bentonite and psyllium, and continue to take all my supplements, which is, what are they? It's just my whole vitamin C, my Blue Ice Royal, my Reline, and my probiotic, as along with my minerals. Okay, that's enough of that.
Okay, very good. All right, we'll go to our question. 602-666-6027 is the number. If you want to talk to Dr. Dean, you've got to hit *5 on your keypad to raise your hand in the studio, so we know you want to speak to her. Otherwise, your phone stays on mute, and you won't be able to talk with her. So you've got to hit *5 so we can get your phone and take it off mute. Here's
but we're doing mailbag. Okay. I'm fasting, remember. I'm tired and irritable.
Yes, thank you, Carolyn. Okay, but listen, this question came up a couple weeks ago, and I can't remember what you said, but my 6-week-old granddaughter, similar age range, has been prescribed Zantac for acid reflux. Is there something that we can do to treat this besides Zantac?
Wow. I can't talk about it. I mean, you're asking me to do a medical on a little baby. I would get nailed if I said anything. Sorry.
Very good.
Yeah. I mean, you can read blogs I've written. Go to my Future Health Now encyclopedia. I don't know. I mean, is it the bottled milk, breast milk? Looking at what's going on in that regard. But yeah, it is incredible how many children are being given these acid blockers, stomach blockers. Just horrible.
Yeah, it's incredible. Okay, very good. Now, from the mailbag, let's get to your questions, and we've still got a few lingering on the chat. I do see your questions, but we've got to do what's going on here too. So let's do this. I've been told that my electrolytes are low. What causes this? Do I add salt to my water? If so, what does that salt do to correct this, since we've always been told to reduce our salt intake? And is that maybe why I have bags under my eyes?
Well, the whole thing about electrolytes, they're tested in a lab, and sometimes those tests can be inaccurate if you're dehydrated. And the reason why I recommend sea salt in water, unrefined sea salt with some color to it, so it has minerals, is so that the minerals and the water in your cells can work your metabolic processes. If you've got a sucked dry cell, it's not going to do anything. And water follows minerals, minerals follow water into the cell. And then if that's happening, if your water's following your minerals, then it's not in your ankles, it's not in your fingers, it's not in bags under your eyes. So minerals are the most important thing, and I don't know, being told your electrolytes are low, maybe you just don't have enough minerals in the first place. So there, that's a start.
Okay, very good. Question, how important is it to have alkaline urine, especially when waking up in the morning? Sometimes I feel like the calcium is being pulled out of my bones. I ache big time all over, and recently I've tested my urine pH, and it's often 5.0 acidic. I do take Remag and Remite. If I don't, I get awful leg cramps. Thank you.
Well, I don't know what this business about the calcium. Say that again. Where does calcium come in?
I don't know, but it just says, I feel like calcium is being pulled out of my bones. I ache big time all over.
Right. Okay. Well, it sounds, the question was how important is it to have alkaline urine? Well, the whole thing about balancing the body starts, from what you put in your mouth. And I'm not big on pH, urine pH, but someone who's having symptoms like this person has does sound very toxic. So that's a question of would some coffee enemas help? Would some bentonite and psyllium help? Is there enough hydration with the sea salt? And is there high calcium in the diet? When you go on a keto diet, and this could be a sidebar, this person may not be on a keto diet. When you go on a keto diet, and if you embrace dairy, then you're going to have a lot of calcium, and that's where you need the extra magnesium. And calcium being pulled out of the bones, that's just, she's saying she has pain and inflammation. Maybe she doesn't have enough calcium. So it's a big question. It's what we would sort of surmise in someone who has total body meltdown. So it's a matter of reading some of the books, I guess the keto book might be good because it has the coffee enema in there. The yeast book might be good too. It could be that there are a lot of yeast toxins. So it's a complex question, but you can do some reading and see what strikes you to answer your own question.
Very good. Also, make sure you're at the therapeutic doses of Remag and Remite. And with all that going on, that's 2 teaspoons of Remag and at least a teaspoon to a teaspoon and a half of Remite in 2 liters of water with the sea salt. So you make sure you've got that going on as your base. Okay. Carolyn, 3 years ago, I was going to the gym 5 days a week and usually twice a day. Lord, I took yoga, weight training classes, and Zumba. My legs were my strongest asset, and for some reason, they've become my weakest asset for the past 2 years. I got blood clots in my left leg, as well as a Baker's cyst behind my left knee. My leg muscles have been tight, tense, and painful. It hurts to walk, stand, or bend. I've had several cases of RLS for some time. I started taking Remag a year ago. I've worked up to 3 teaspoons a day. It has helped considerably, but I still suffer from the same symptoms and require gabapentin for restless legs. I also have sleep issues like falling asleep and slaying asleep. Frequent urination and RLS are the main culprits. I take trazodone to help me sleep. I would like to get off my meds already, but the Remag is having a laxative effect on me. What would you recommend?
Right. I'd look a little bit at total biology, maybe at the end of the physical things, like why would you get blood clots? What's going on with the left side of your body? Is it varicose veins? Because veins, there is a certain story behind veins. So you could look at total biology. And by that I mean if it seems to you that these symptoms are a conflict that you don't understand, it would be helpful to speak to our referral person, Dr. David Holt, about what that could mean. And if it's just Remag you're taking, perhaps it's not. When someone still has insomnia and magnesium deficiency symptoms, then they tend not to be on enough magnesium, but you're getting the laxative effect. And that's where you add the Remag lotion and make sure you're on Remag 1.5 teaspoons or to 2 teaspoons if you go up to 4 teaspoons of Remag, and look at the RNA reset drops. That can be very helpful for kind of mysterious symptoms where you know you're doing all the right things. The yeast protocol may be helpful. I don't know enough about what's going on. You might call customer service and ask them for our Tier 2 questions so that I can have more information to help you along. So we'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. A question from Azam, A-Z-A-M. Is there a relation between type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure?
Well, they say there is. It's like the metabolic syndrome. They'll put it all in that bucket. People who have obesity and high blood sugar, high blood pressure, but oftentimes it's because you start to take meds for one and it causes the other. So look up metabolic syndrome. I've written about it in Magnesium Miracle, for example. And the treatment is the complement formulas and a keto diet and to get your insulin under control.
Dr. Yoder sent in this question. My question for today is, how is the increase in today's hectic lifestyle contributing to the feelings/emotions that are known to downregulate the immune system function? And how can those be overcome or fixed with functional medicine?
Well, I guess we start with the massive stress in people's lifestyle. We really start looking at magnesium. Because if a person can relax and calm the muscles in the body, then you're not in a tense state. If your adrenals are firing all the time and creating chronic cortisol elevation, the magnesium, the sodium and sea salt, vitamin C can help calm the adrenals. So everything we do with the complement formulas is geared toward helping people with their massive stress. And yes, the whole immune system business, we've added the Pico Silver to help support the immune system. As you become weakened, you become vulnerable. I mean, you think of our radish study where the plot that didn't have our fermented barley mash, it got attacked by worms and bugs, whereas the pot with the fermented mash, which is a living probiotic, prebiotic that just gave so much life force to the plants that they were no longer vulnerable. We want to get people on the right building blocks of minerals and the methylated B vitamins and our whey pea and rice protein powders to stimulate the glutathione. Everything in the complement formulas is geared toward what we're all going through right now, even to the RNA reset drops themselves, where we say the body should be able to adapt to our crazy radiation in the atmosphere, the high amount of carbons from all the volcanoes and the forest fires. So that's what I recommend for the downregulation of the immune system. We upregulate it. Right, Ginny?
We absolutely do. That is so wonderful. Yes, thank you. And I'm having questions about where is your keto book, Carolyn, and I'm just telling people online. It's at drcarolyndeanlive.com under our book category, and it's called Reset Your Ideal Weight. I will put a link here in the show notes, and I'll put it here on the chat line, but that is where it is, and you can find it and review that for your benefit and your extreme joy, because it will be very joyful. Okay, now let's also get to these questions. Carmela, I love being a part of Club Carolyn. That's cute. Thank you for the opportunity to interact with you. It's a huge blessing. Okay, she has 5 questions, Carolyn. So the first question is, can the RNA drops or magnesium do anything for a dysfunctioning parathyroid? Any suggestions?
Well, for the parathyroid, I mean, I had to put a section in the latest edition of Magnesium Miracle about parathyroids, because that is an instance where a benign tumor in the parathyroids elevates the blood calcium and makes it hard for magnesium to do its work. So what we find with people who say their magnesium isn't working and they seem to have calcification, I mean, maybe we should ask the person who wrote in about her 2 years of blood clots, etc., if she's had her calcium levels addressed. And I'm just looking up my copy of the Magnesium Miracle to talk about the parathyroids, because there's a certain level of calcium above which people have to be investigated for hyperparathyroidism. Now, it sounds like this person knows she has a parathyroid problem. All I can do is tell people to get their calcium checked. And again, I'm looking for this in my book. I am consulting my book for the answer here. And it's the Norman and Parathyroid Center in Florida is where I send people. And let me see what the calcium levels, darn. It's like still in the normal range, the calcium. So a lot of people think, oh, my calcium is fine, but what they say is at a certain level, and I will be more careful here and not flip over it, and I'll have to make a note of this. Okay. Adults over age 35 should not have calcium levels higher than 9.9, where the average range of calcium is 8.8 to 10.7. So if you're higher than 9.9, it's possible that you have a parathyroid benign tumor, an adenoma, that is creating this excess calcium in your blood. And that has to be addressed. As far as I've been able to tell with the the people who come to us, the REMAG does help them feel better, but I think most people do have to get their parathyroid adenomas looked at and probably removed. So I've wasted too much time on that searching. So go ahead, Ginny, with question number 2 from Carmela.
Can lost bone be rebuilt in the body and teeth?
Yes, we've seen it happen. We absolutely have with exercise and the REMAG, and if you aren't getting dairy in your diet with the Recalcio, but it does take exercise and minerals.
Given that the keto diet is mostly fat, what supplements are essential to augment?
The complement formulas.
Do you feel any conditions such as gastritis, colitis, chronic infections, co-infections, etc., can be remedied through the RNA reset and the keto programs? Any experience in these type of cases?
She's not asking for much, is she? My goodness, Carmela.
Yes, Carmela must not listen to our show very often, God bless her heart.
Yeah. Any itis is an inflammation, and magnesium is the first nutrient that addresses inflammation, and for boosting the immune system against infection, although we're not allowed to say that, it's the Pico Silver. So we have the synergistic complementary complement formulas that do address all these things, and it's just a matter of taking them in sufficient amounts. Like Ginny said earlier, I can't tell you how many people will say to us, well, I'm taking half a teaspoon of REMAG a day, and I'm still, I've only gotten rid of 50% of my symptoms. So we just say, well, take more, very patiently.
Yep, you got to take more. Is it truly possible to reverse insulin resistance and estrogen dominance through these methods?
Well, Dr. Fung just spent an hour with us telling us that you could shut off your insulin if you stop eating carbs. And estrogen dominance, that may take progesterone therapy to balance out. It depends on where the estrogen dominance comes from. But I've been reading his blogs and some of the keto people, and they're talking about reversing PCOS with the keto diet. So, I think what we're proposing with our complement formulas, the keto diet, the yeast diet, all those things are getting people to a very high level of wellness. And I'd say we're reaching 95% of people with just what we're doing. And then, heaven forbid, the other 5% are people who really need to be seen by a competent holistic doctor for specific treatments.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, once you shut down the inflammatory response in the body, and you do that, number one, with managing your insulin, as Dr. Fung has said, and that comes through not feeding food to the body, so the pancreas does not produce insulin. And then you flip to the other side and you feed the body the magnesium and the minerals that it requires to complete its processes. You've got a 1-2 knockout punch, and you've got such a prevention against disease. And I thought the autophagy thing was just absolutely fabulous. I mean, I've heard a lot about it because Megan Ramos, actually, who runs Dr. Fung's IDM program up in Toronto, does a lot of lectures and stuff on autophagy and what they're finding about cellular regeneration and all this kind of business is really, really amazing. So, the thing that is the easiest thing to do is do it for yourself. I mean, if, I had somebody the other day talking to me about they're afraid of Alzheimer's because they're, everybody in their family's had it for 2 generations. And I was like, well, then go on a ketogenic diet. and eliminate the sugars and manage your protein intake and look at biologically what the cause of Alzheimer's is. And then, if you're really that concerned, or do you just, want to talk about it type of a thing? But you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these things are all manageable. Yeah.
Yeah, and some people have lost touch with their own intuition about their own health and their own symptoms, and are inundated with so much contradictory information. But that's why we kind of open the door for people with REMAG. We just know that anybody who takes REMAG is going to feel better, and then from that position, people have the energy to do more and go deeper and do a layering of good health. But yeah, you got to dive in and do it. We do have a lot of people who email and ask all kinds of questions, and we try to answer them, because it's like your brain has to accept what not accept what we're saying, but your brain has to accept the fact that you can be healthy, you can be different than what doctors are telling you, that at 80 you might as well just give up. I mean, that's horrible, but that is the current mood.
Now, what would you say to, there's a very persistent gentleman on our chat line tonight, Derek, who's thrown up tons and tons of wordy words about how Dr. McDougall does not agree with Dr. Fung about ketogenic diet and these kinds of principles, and he wants to know what your comments are on it. And honestly, Derek, I haven't read that to Dr. Dean, and at this time in the show I probably wouldn't. But Carolyn, what would you kind of say about, anyone who's Dr. Fung's credentials just with his own clinic. I don't think that Dr. McDougall has a clinic devoted to intermittent fasting and keto. And he's
a vegetarian. He's a vegan vegetarian. So his diet is based on, you just Google it. You see the difference, Derek. Do your own Googling. I'm not a vegetarian. Vegetarian diet hurt me. So McDougall diet based on starches, corn, potatoes, rice, wheat, most of which are now GMO, and people are getting sick from the GMO aspect of those starches with the addition of fruits and vegetables. Forget it. That would just kill me. A vegan diet could be, we're talking about soy or whatever. So no, I am not interested in the McDougall diet. And you can't tell me that vegetarian diets are healthy anymore. I mean, we had Shakaya on October 1st on the show, and she was a vegan, raw vegetarian for 20, 30 years, and it just about killed her. But she kept being told that she had to save the animals. And look, try to save yourself first before you go looking to save animals. Take care of your own health. 4% of the population is vegan vegetarian. That is not many people. And for some reason, they've got everybody's ear about, you have to be vegetarian to be healthy, and it's not true. So that's what I think of the McDougall diet, Derek.
Hey, Carolyn, since you're in a critical mood, I'm just reading, somebody says, autophagy is very intriguing. Isn't that a syndrome of information overload, going on the internet and reading about something called autophagy? I'm not ever going to look into autophagy.
Phagy.
Right? Phagy. What do I need to know about that? I'm already healthy, so why would it be intriguing?
Well, one thing that's intriguing... Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Go ahead, Ginny. Yeah, go ahead, Ginny.
I was going to say the thing that's interesting to me about it is that, Ion said that we would only ever need the drops at a point in our future. And autophagy actually reinforces that principle, that you don't need to eat.
What is it?
It's just an explanation of what fasting is doing, which is helping recycle proteins.
Right, and this person typed in, I'm not going to listen to today's show, I can't fast. Was the whole show about fasting?
Keto diet. Yeah.
No? not fasting. There's other factors. Yeah. So this person checked out because they thought that it was all about fasting. So they're missing out a lot of other stuff. Don't assume you know anything, and you'll get better. You'll do better.
Don't assume anything.
Yeah, don't assume you.
No, that's the wrong advice, because people assume that other people know more than them, and then they Google themselves to death.
Yeah, that's my point. Don't assume you know anything. You're not going to find out anything. Stop worrying about yourself. When you get our products, you're cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. And that was actually our lovely listener, Barbara, who listens every week. And she sent in her question, and I think she kind of missed the answer, because Dr. Fung started out at the very beginning talking about cases of hypoglycemia. And what she was saying was, I'm hypoglycemic, I have to eat every 3 hours, and how am I going to fast or lose weight if I have to eat every 3 hours? And Dr. Fung we didn't pose that question directly because he kind of covered the whole issue about hypoglycemia.
I asked about it.
Oh, you did? Okay. All right.
Yeah, so the answer is within the first hour. And, basically your body can survive a hypoglycemic attack because it'll just get your glycogen stores out of your liver, and start burning your fat stores. So, but I'm not going to tell Barbara, stop, don't eat for 12 hours. You have to slowly get into it.
I'm telling Barbara, and if you guys don't email her, you listen to this show in the archives, Barbara.
Yeah.
And you email that point to her, Ginny.
And Bob,
yes,
Bob
sir.
isn't even fasting.
Is Bob fasting?
I'm not even listening.
Oh, my God. That's so funny. Okay, very good. Now let's go on. Camilla, I want to just respond because she said, Carmela, she said, thanks for the offer of information, and you're right, this is only my second show. I forgot to mention that I've had amazing results with Pico Silver and RNA. I started after my first show a few weeks ago. The question is, will the RNA drops rebuild my microbiome since it's fermented? I've heard silver kills the good and beneficial yeast. Okay, hold on. Thank you for your patience with all my questions. I've experienced amazing changes in only a few weeks, hoping to understand how to rebuild my microbiome. Thank you so much. Really love your energy, sweet spirit, and wisdom. And what I want to say,
RNA. Yeah, what?
Go, Karen. Go. You go.
RNA reset drops. Yes, they have pre and probiotic aspects. We will be bringing out our own probiotic, and what I'm going to be telling people when they take our Saccharomyces boulardii and fulvic volvic carbon-based probiotic is eat fermented food as well. Get your kefirs and your sauerkraut going and your kimchi, because it's foods that provided people with their probiotics all these millennia. And we shouldn't just have to depend on capsules, but now we do because we're so depleted. Pico, the way our chemist makes it, the Pico silver is a picometer-sized silver. It is absorbed high up in the mouth, throat, stomach, and top of the small intestine. It does not kill things other than the bad guys. Seriously, it doesn't get down into the intestines and create this imbalance. So, Carmela, go to drcarolyndeanlive.com and read the silver report. You'll just be totally amazed.
Yes, and email me at support, SUPPORT at RNA Reset, and ask for the information on beneficial bacteria in Pico Silver, and you'll find out the information biologically about why bad bacteria only has a single wall, healthy bacteria has a double wall, and Pico Silver borrows electrons, kills one, and actually supports the other energetically through electricity. We have the whole thing broken down for you, and we'll send it to you, and that will put an end to all your worries about it, because there's absolutely no cause for concern, none whatsoever, none. Yeah,
Yay.
none.
Hey, Carolyn, you just mentioned the benefits of sauerkraut, right?
Yeah.
That's why we got these jars of sauerkraut in our fridge? I should be eating that?
Oh, stop it, you silly man. You silly boy.
I'll go for a second joke. But anyways, it's good. I could sort of snack on it, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Okay, Ginny, over to you.
Okay, very good. All right. Let's see. We're back to our questions now, and our questions are right here. Okay. This is a great question from Cheryl. Mitochondrial DNA damage. Why do people who suffer from fluoroquinolone toxicity also develop pre-diabetic and diabetes? What part of the mitochondria and its many functions is causing this, and what can we do to repair and support mitochondria?
Well, I don't know that answer, but since we know that the fluoride and fluoroquinolones damages your capacity to keep magnesium on board, it binds to magnesium, makes it unavailable, and if you don't have enough magnesium in your mitochondria to run the Krebs cycle and to make the mitochondria work, then they're going to be dehydrated and damaged. And what was the other part? I think the basis is lack of magnesium. Just go from there. Yeah. When you take a history on someone who's taken a fluoroquinolone drug, mostly they're antibiotics, they will be active. They were exercising. A lot of athletes. They'll be running and whatever, and then they get some sort of illness. They go to the doctor, and they get an antibiotic, and it's a fluoroquinolone like Cipro. And then their tired muscles that are magnesium deficient to start with are further compromised by this fluoride grab, and their muscles can tense up and tear. And they'll tear along a tendon, so that Achilles tendon rupture is a black box warning now on some of these fluoroquinolones. It's just horrible. So I'm not going to go into any big dissertation or research about mitochondrial DNA damage until people fix their magnesium. And then if that's not enough, then you can look further. If we catch people within the first few weeks of their damage or, heaven forbid, rupture, then they can come back, but there's no guarantee. Years ago, some people that would come to us, they'd have the problem for so long it was really hard to reverse. But anyway, never give up. Just keep on trying to reverse the damage. And when you look at it, I used to say the whole body could rebuild itself, rejuvenate itself every 7 years. But there are doctors who are saying that it's a matter of 8 months where you can renew your whole body. So put that in your brain so that you don't think that it's hopeless.
Right. Very good. Excellent.
I invite Derek to call in. Let's have a debate.
Oh, I don't want to debate. I'm tired and emotional.
No, not now. In the future.
What future?
He's saying your comments are truly uneducated, Carolyn. Well, you know a lot about vegetarianism, and he doesn't know that, and he thinks he knows a lot. We need to have a Derek Carolyn smackdown.
I don't care.
Oh, gosh, please, no.
I'm perfectly happy eating animals, Derek. Get over yourself, Derek.
And Jen is telling me to get patience, and LB loves the fact that Jenny explained autophagy. I've disrupted the show completely. I now retire from the airwaves.
But it's so crazy. I mean, people who are so fanatically pro-vegetarianism, it's terrible because you've gotten so emotional about meat or anti-meat. We should go and look at Shakaya's website and do the debate with her. All I know is that it would kill me to be on a vegetarian diet, and people will say to me, oh, well, you can take the amino acids that you're missing in an animal diet, or you can take all these supplements. I don't want to be taking amino acids when I could be eating the animal protein directly. and not taking synthetic amino acids.
Yeah, no one knows more about vegetarianism than you and I did because we started it 50 years ago. We've been in that world for 50 years, and luckily we got out of it.
Yeah, we didn't stay in long. Okay.
Derek, you're a neophyte. You just knew. You just found your local cult for your identity.
Okay, Ginny, more questions.
Yeah, let me just say one of Derek's comments is if carbs are evil. Nobody's saying that carbs are evil, Derek. That's that's not a solid comment. This is an opportunity for people who have type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance to reverse their health condition, and all you have to do is respect that. That's it. And if you want to call in and talk to Carolyn about it, you'll have to wait for 2 weeks because next week we will not be on the show Monday evening. Carolyn and I will be traveling. We will not be on the show.
I'll be on. I'll take all callers. Let me be on.
Oh, God.
Yeah, give me a day.
That's so hilarious there, Derek. You call and talk to Bob about it. That'll be funny. We could probably sell tickets for that, actually. Yes, okay. That's so funny. Bill's typing in saying they are cranky without meat, and they have steak and beef, vegetarians. That's so funny. All right, no more mudslinging. All right, anyway, let's go on with the next question. Okay, lupus patient. This is for Sarah. My father died of a melanoma that metastasized to his adrenal glands, kidney, and brain. He also had type 2 diabetes. My mother passed at age 44 of breast cancer. I'm age 39, and I'm recently struggling because of 2 occipital lobe strokes that luckily have not taken my personality or play. Good for you, Sarah. I'm fighting for my life. I gave up drinking in August and all breakthrough medication for pain in September. Next is extended relief morphine I take 2 times a day. I have severe arthritis in each of my fingers that can only be fixed by surgery. Putting that off as long as I can, i.e. hopefully never doing it, God willing. I want my life back. I'm eating organic and clean, cutting out sugar, reading labels, avoiding more carbs than ever before. I need some direction on what to do now. Thanks, Sarah.
Well, that's, it's our total body meltdown scenario. So I'd be looking at the yeast diet, looking at how, well, I don't know if you have yeast overgrowth, but it's a good diet that goes over the complement formulas. It goes over detoxing. I don't know if you need to lose weight, but the inflammation of the arthritis, we really have had people with rheumatoid arthritis who will tell us just rubbing the Remag lotion on the fingers had helped. Actually, that's one of our customers. Her 86-year-old mother refused to do any of our formulas, so the daughter put Remag lotion in her hand cream, and she just started using this hand cream and reversed her anti-nuclear antibodies, et cetera, just with the Remag lotion. So anyway, just go on the protocol to give the building blocks to your body for more perfect cells. And you start with the yeast book at drcarolyndeanlive.com.
Very good. Excellent. Okay, next question here. Sorry, Carolyn. Okay, we've got that person. Okay, I think we got caught up. These were the questions for the show. So whatever you have left over, but I think we got a lot of questions done today. I'm looking through. I just want to make sure. Yeah, but we did answer a lot of questions. Yes, I think we got them all.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have 10 minutes. Are there any chats or phones?
Did you look at the in-quick, Ginny?
Bob, you stay out of it.
No.
I'm going to throw something at you.
She throws something at me, Ginny. I already did. So, look at the
Bob,
in-quick.
I know there's a lot of stuff on here, but sometimes these are people just talking back and forth to themselves. So I have been watching it. And if you see something you want Carolyn to address, I'm looking for well-formed, fully formed questions for Carolyn that will be beneficial in putting it into the archives, not something that people's just writing, blah, blah.
Okay, if nobody has anything else, am I on my own now?
Yeah. Yes, you're on your own.
So here's the latest I've been reading, and Ginny, one of our practitioners asked me what I thought of the Healing is Voltage books by Dr. Jerry Tennant, T-E-N-N-A-N-T, Jerry Tennant. Now, he's this brilliant medical doctor who's developed his own system of how to help his people, but it's very interesting. And you know what I do? I'll take somebody and kind of critique them, but mainly based on what we know and what's working for us. And so, of course, he's saying your body runs on bioelectricity, and he measures them. Cells are designed to run in an environment of negative 20 to negative 25 millivolts. And the negative part means that the cells have electrons to donate. Now, it gets technical, but I'll try to. Anyway, to repair and heal, cells need an environment of negative 50 millivolts. Now, what's interesting there is when a cell is healing, it'll be kind of sped up and appear irritated. And see, that's what I think happens with our people, is when they take our minerals, they speed up their millivolts, because what are minerals but the bioelectric electrons, that will help create new cells. So anyway, when you're healing and repairing, sometimes you feel it. So then he goes on, inadequate voltage is a characteristic of all chronic disease. Either you do not have the necessary voltage to run the cells, or the higher voltage needed to make new cells. Now, that's exactly what's happening with our people with chronic disease, with total body meltdown, is they don't have enough voltage to heal and repair. Where do you get the voltage? From minerals. And he goes on, to heal you need the proper voltage, yes, and he does say you need the necessary raw materials. Now, when he talks about the raw materials, I've looked at his products, actually, and he's using magnesium malate at, not high enough amounts, and using... He's got a powder with like 100 ingredients, and you know what I think of that. It's just too much distraction. And he says chronic disease is a failure to make functional cells that contain functional mitochondria. We talk about mitochondria all the time and how they're supported by magnesium. So it's interesting work. He talks about the muscles being like batteries, and yes, because most of the magnesium is in the muscles. He talks about the ATP, ADP battery. That's our adenosine triphosphate and adenosine diphosphate, and the ATP is your energy molecule that you need magnesium in order to make it. So yes, we know about that. And what he uses as his solutions are machines that increase a person's voltage. So they're what a naturopathic friend and I used to say many years ago is boys with toys. He's got the $3,000 to $8,000 machines that he says you can use to pump up your voltage. Well, you pump up your voltage by having pico-ionic remag that does the job for you, rather than trying to force stimulation of your body. He talks a lot about acupuncture. I think he even mentions homeopathy. And seriously, I studied those modalities many years ago in naturopathic training, and I realized that a lot of people were so chronically ill, they did not have the energy to utilize acupuncture and homeopathy therapies. You stick a needle in someone, if they don't have the voltage to allow that treatment to work to allow the current to proceed along the meridian, then game over. What do you do? What the acupuncturists did, they started hooking up the acupuncture needles to electrical voltage boxes to force a stimulation. I mean, the whole thing, you have to look at it in a common sense perspective of if you know intellectually need the building blocks and, the building blocks don't seem to be working, we'll have to force energy. Then look at the building blocks. That's what I did. I went to a chemist to find out how to make minerals that were so well absorbed that you didn't have to give it intravenously or force a stimulation. So that is my rant for today, Ginny.
Very good rant. Very good rant, Carolyn. Excellent, excellent. Yeah, so true. I mean, people, they just have to have the experience of understanding. I mean, when I think about how practical is it to, were our ancestors hooked up to machines? No. They were on the face of the earth. They were getting the proper magnesium. A lot of them lived by the ocean. They had good water. They had rich soil, and they were perfectly fine. You didn't have to be hooked up to machines and all this business. And that's not what we're inspired to encourage people to do at all. It's just to restore your body to its natural balance that comes from the earth.
Right. And Tennant talks about that too, getting out in nature, getting in the sun. Of course, we all talk about that. But, it is so blatantly obvious to me every day. It layers on my brain that by having a magnesium that's 100% absorbed, we have hit the mother lode. And with that, I say thank you and good night.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. It was a great show. Thank you, Derek.
Thank you, Julie.
You've been listening to Live with Dr. Carolyn Dean here on AchieveRadio.com. Till next time, so long, and thanks for all the fish.
AchieveRadio.com.
When it's much more simple than that. You have a physical body. Your physical breathing, blood pumping, mucus creating physicality